Sophie, a 9-year-old girl, cries every night after Catherine, the maid, goes to bed. It's a silent cry, smothered by the pillow so that no one can hear. One particularly silent night, Catherine became suspicious of Sophie's crying and the behavior of Louis, her father. He came into Sophie's room after Catherine had gone to her room. Her heart squeezing, Catherine pretended to sleep and kept an eye out for Louis's footsteps around the house. She heard Sophie's bedroom door open slowly. Holding her breath, Catherine quietly got out of bed and approached Sophie's bedroom door. She put her ear to the door and heard low whispers and muffled crying. Louis's voice sounded distinctly threatening, and Sophie was mumbling, trying to hold back the tears. Catherine's heart squeezed as she realized that Louis wasn't just scolding Sophie, but seemed to be forcing the girl to continue with her grueling work routine, even at night, rehearsing poses and lines for upcoming modeling jobs. The girl, exhausted and emotionally drained, was begging for a break. "You have to keep going, Sophie," Louis whispered with a coldness that made Catherine shudder. "There's no time for rest. You know how important this is for us." "But, Daddy, I'm so tired," Sophie replied, her voice trembling with exhaustion and fear. "Please, just a little rest." "No," Louis cut off Sophie's plea, "you'll do as I say. Don't forget who depends on you." Catherine was paralyzed with horror when she heard these words. She felt a lump in her throat as she realized the weight Sophie was carrying, a responsibility that no child should have. Louis's every word was a blow to Catherine's heart, and she felt powerless and desperate to help Sophie. Sophie's muffled crying continued as Louis insisted on rehearsals, and Catherine fought back the tears that threatened to fall from her face. The courage she felt to keep listening was driven by the love and protection she felt for Sophie. She knew she had to do something, but the intensity of the situation paralyzed her. Every second seemed like an eternity as she listened to Sophie's suffering and Louis's coldness. Catherine returned to her room, her eyes wide with fear and her mind buzzing with thoughts. She knew she couldn't keep letting this happen. The horror she had heard that night had changed everything. The reality of Sophie's suffering was unbearable, and Catherine was determined to find a way to protect the little girl from that nightmare. Catherine, now aware of the horror that was happening, knew she had to find a way to protect little Sophie, even if it meant facing Louis and the dangers that could bring. Louis Alvarez was an impeccably dressed man who was always focused on success. His groomed appearance reflected an organized and meticulously planned life. Every strand of hair in place, every suit impeccably tailored. But this obsession with control wasn't limited to himself, it extended relentlessly to Sophie. For Louis, Sophie wasn't just a daughter. She was a project, an investment that had to be cultivated and molded to achieve perfection in the fashion world. From a young age, Sophie was introduced to the competitive world of children's modeling. Photo shoots, castings, social events, her routine was exhausting and relentless. Louis was always there, not with the love and support a child would expect from a father, but with a critical eye and incessant demands. Every little mistake was rigorously corrected, every moment of distraction repressed. Louis saw Sophie's career as an extension of his own success, completely ignoring the girl's emotional needs. Photo shoots were especially difficult for Sophie. The bright lights, the long periods of standing, the forced smiles, it all exhausted her. But there was never any rest. Louis was always there, behind the camera, making sure that every pose was perfect, every expression calculated. He pressured her incessantly to do better, to be more charming, more graceful. "You have to do your best, Sophie. Success waits for no one," he would say, his words cutting like blades. In her rare moments off, Sophie tried to find some relief. She loved drawing, losing herself in a world of colors and shapes, where she could be herself without the pressures of her father. But even these moments were interrupted by Louis. "Drawing won't get you anywhere," he would say, taking the colored pencils from Sophie's small hands. "You should concentrate on what's important." The weight of Louis's expectations crushed Sophie. The long hours at work, combined with the lack of parental understanding and affection, made her feel constantly anxious and inadequate. At night, alone in her room, Sophie cried silently, hugging her teddy bear, the only companion who seemed to understand her pain. During the day, Sophie is a cheerful child. She plays in the garden with her dolls and laughs at the funny stories Catherine tells her while she prepares dinner. But when night comes and the lights go out, Sophie's room becomes a stage for her hidden pain. She doesn't know how to express the feelings that squeeze her little heart. Words seem insufficient to describe the anguish that consumes her. Catherine, a kind and caring woman, looks after Sophie with affection, almost as if she were her own daughter. However, Catherine has no way of knowing about the girl's nightly tears. She believed that Sophie slept peacefully every night, like any child her age. Catherine strives to provide a cozy home, but has no way of guessing the emotional storms Sophie faces alone. The reasons for Sophie's crying are complex and difficult to explain. She lives only with her father, a cold and distant man who thinks only of the money Sophie can generate for him. From an early age, Sophie has worked as a model. Her father sees her as a source of income, a way of ensuring his own comfort and status. He cares little for his daughter's feelings, her emotional needs, or her well-being. Sophie understands that her work helps to support the household, but she can't help feeling abandoned. She misses her mother very much in her life. Her mother, Marianne, is very poor and unable to bring her up on her own, so she allows Sophie to live with her father. Her mother's absence creates a void that Catherine, despite all her affection, is unable to fill completely. All these emotions build up inside Sophie, creating an emotional storm that she doesn't know how to cope with. Tears are the only way Sophie finds to relieve some of the weight she carries. But even crying only brings temporary relief, because the next morning it starts all over again. Catherine watched Sophie's suffering with a broken heart. She cared for Sophie lovingly, trying to offer the comfort that Louis so cruelly denied her. During the day, she prepared meals that Sophie liked, told stories to make her smile, and was always ready for a warm hug. Catherine was Sophie's refuge. Louis, however, remained blind to his daughter's emotional needs. He was so absorbed in his quest for success that he didn't notice the signs of Sophie's suffering. The dark circles under her eyes, the lack of energy, the forced smiles, everything went unnoticed. For Louis, the only indicator of success was the recognition and contracts Sophie got. He saw every tear as a weakness, every request for a break as an obstacle to be overcome. Catherine, her heart squeezing, watched the cycle of pressure and pain repeat itself day after day. She wanted to intervene, she wanted to protect Sophie from her father's clutches, but she felt powerless. Her role in the house was limited, and any confrontation with Louis could result in her dismissal, leaving Sophie even more helpless. In moments of solitude, Catherine thought of ways to help Sophie. She looked for small loopholes in Louis's control to offer some relief. Perhaps a walk in the park, away from the cameras and the pressure, or an afternoon drawing together, where Sophie could just be a child. But these moments were rare and brief, always interrupted by Louis's oppressive presence. Sophie, with her childlike heart and simple dreams, was constantly crushed by the expectations of a father who saw her only as a means to success. And Catherine watched helplessly, desperately trying to find a way to brighten the life of the little girl she loved so much. Sophie had a sparkle in her eyes that transcended the cameras. Her little heart, however, yearned for something beyond the flashes and carefully rehearsed poses. Catherine detected this restlessness in the intimate moments between photo shoots. She saw beyond Sophie's elegant clothes and impeccable smile. She realized the child behind the precocious model facade. For Sophie, Catherine was more than just a maid. She was a confidant, a friend she could trust with her deepest secrets. While her father was too busy with the demands of social and professional life, Catherine took the time to listen to Sophie, to understand her hopes and dreams. In quiet moments, when the cameras weren't pointed at her, Sophie expressed her desire for a different life. She imagined herself running free in open fields, without her father's critical eyes and expectations hanging over her like a dark cloud. Sophie longed for freedom, for a genuine childhood, away from the pressures of the fashion world. Catherine understood the child's need for authenticity and kindness in an often ruthless and superficial world. With delicacy, Catherine encouraged Sophie to pursue her own dreams, to find her voice amidst the tumult of other people's expectations. Catherine, with her calm and welcoming presence, was Sophie's safe harbor amidst the storms of the fashion world. While Sophie plunged into the turbulent waters of expectations and competition, Catherine was the anchor that kept her grounded in her own essence. With kind words and loving gestures, Catherine offered Sophie the emotional support she so desperately needed to face the challenges that came her way. When the critical voices around Sophie threatened to suffocate her confidence, it was in Catherine's comforting arms that she found refuge. There, in the quiet corners of the house, Sophie could vent her doubts and fears without the weight of judgment. Catherine listened with empathy, letting Sophie feel understood in a world that often seemed to be against her. With her serene wisdom, Catherine advises Sophie not to be ashamed of being who she really is, even if it means swimming against the current. She also reminds Sophie that true worth lies not in fame or fortune, but in integrity and goodness of heart. With her unconditional love and unwavering support, Catherine helps Sophie find the balance between her ambitions and her emotional health, gently guiding her through the complex maze of life. Louis, Sophie's father, silently observes the interactions between his daughter and Catherine with a complex mix of emotions. While Sophie seeks comfort in Catherine's welcoming arms, Louis finds himself torn between his ambition for Sophie's success in the fashion world and his own unfulfilled dreams. For Louis, Sophie represents not only his daughter, but also an extension of his own unfulfilled ambitions and aspirations. He sees in Sophie the potential to achieve what he himself couldn't, an opportunity to realize his dreams through her. His desire to see Sophie triumph is often overshadowed by his own disappointment and resentment at not having achieved the success he longed for. While Sophie finds solace in Catherine's arms, Louis feels increasingly distant, unable to connect emotionally with his daughter in the same way. He sees in Catherine not only a maid, but also a rival, someone who could offer Sophie the emotional support that he himself is unable to provide. This subtle rivalry leaves him feeling uncomfortable and inadequate. Watching Sophie open up to Catherine, Louis is confronted with his own failings as a father. He wonders if he is capable of offering Sophie the love and emotional support she needs, or if he is too absorbed in his own ambitions to really connect with his daughter. As Louis struggles to deal with his conflicting emotions, he finds himself trapped in an endless cycle of unrealized aspirations and unfulfilled expectations. He wants Sophie to succeed, but he also resents her for representing everything he hasn't managed to achieve. This internal battle leaves him distant and disconnected, unable to open up to the true meaning of love and family. His mixed feelings of ambition and resentment leave him isolated, unable to give himself over to the love and emotional connection that Sophie so desperately seeks. At night, when silence envelopes the house, Sophie's tears are like small drops of anguish echoing through the corridors. She feels suffocated by the pressure and expectations that seem to weigh on her young shoulders. Catherine, even in the moments when Sophie's tears are quieter, recognizes the anguish behind them. She feels Sophie's heart break with each muffled sob, and her own soul writhes in helplessness in the face of the young woman's suffering. Catherine desperately wishes she could dry Sophie's tears, but feels powerless to change the situation. At the same time, she refuses to abandon Sophie and leave her alone with her cold father. She knows she can't wipe away Sophie's tears, but she can be there for her, holding her hand in moments of darkness and uncertainty. As the night progresses and Sophie's tears dry up, Catherine wraps her in a loving embrace, silently promising to be there for her no matter what. The longing Sophie feels for her mother is like a persistent shadow that follows her at all times. She longs for her presence, her maternal love and guidance, especially in moments of anguish and uncertainty. However, Louis, her father, seems distant from this emotional reality. For him, Sophie's obligations to her modeling career are an absolute priority. He dismisses Sophie's longing for her mother as an unnecessary distraction, emphasizing the importance of her rise in the fashion world. For Louis, the memory of Marianne, Sophia's mother, is just a reminder of the past, a memory he would rather leave behind. He clings to the idea that Sophie's success as a model is the key to a bright future, a reality in which there is no room for nostalgia or the past. While Sophie longs for a missing link with her mother, Louis seems determined to sever any ties that threaten to jeopardize Sophie's career progression. He emphasizes the importance of her dedication to her work, making it clear that her obligations as a model come before anything else. While Louis concentrates on Sophie's professional obligations, he seems to ignore the emotional burden she carries in silence. He doesn't see the longing in her eyes or hear the pain in her voice, as he's too busy planning his next move in the fashion industry. Catherine realizes the pain in Sophie's eyes, a silent echo of her mother's longing, which consumes her day after day. She approaches her gently, offering her a comforting hug while trying to find the right words to soothe her troubled heart. Sophie clings to Catherine's cozy presence, seeking refuge in her unwavering support. She feels vulnerable as she talks about her mother, Marianne, a distant figure who hangs over her life like a shadow from the past. Sophie reveals to Catherine the painful truth about her mother. Marianne is still alive, but unable to give Sophie all the comfort that her father does, due to her condition of extreme poverty. Tears stream down Sophie's face as she shares her fragmented memories of Marianne, a woman whose absence has left an immense void in her heart. Sophie remembers with sadness the turbulent days when her family faced financial difficulties. She shares with Catherine the moments when her father, Louis, tried to convince her to stay with him, promising a better future than her mother could offer. The painful memories echo in her mind as she revisits the scenes of conflict and uncertainty that marked that difficult period in her life. For Sophie, her father's promises were like a ray of hope in the midst of the darkness that enveloped her family. She clung to the idea of a brighter future, a life full of opportunities and comfort, which Louis promised to give her. But behind the empty promises, Sophie could feel the pain and anguish of her mother, Marianne, struggling to survive amid the financial difficulties that plagued the family. Catherine feels a knot tighten in her throat as she faces the cruel reality before her. She can no longer ignore the invisible marks that pain has left on Sophie's soul. With courage, she makes a decision that she knows will be difficult, but necessary for the young girl's well-being, to help Sophie find her mother. Catherine knows she cannot remain silent in the face of Sophie's suffering, so she takes the initiative to search for Sophie's mother, Marianne, until she finds her. Sophie, shrouded in a mixture of fear and hope, trusts Catherine to guide her towards her mother. She shares her anxiety and her dreams of rediscovering the love and security she once knew. She feels vulnerable as she exposes her deepest desires, but she knows it's the only way to rewrite her story and find the happiness she so deserves. Catherine knows that the road ahead will be difficult, but she is determined to do whatever it takes to ensure Sophie's safety and well-being. Moved by compassion and the desire to reunite mother and daughter, she begins investigating and following every lead that might lead her to Marianne. Every street traveled, every person interviewed, brings with it a complex mixture of hope and apprehension. She imagines the reunion of mother and daughter, but also fears the possible consequences of her actions. With her relentless determination, Catherine finally manages to track down Marianne, Sophie's mother, and bring her back into her daughter's life. Finally, after days of tireless searching, Catherine finds Marianne. The encounter brings with it an indescribable sense of relief and joy. Marianne, thrilled to see Catherine and to know that her daughter is being cared for by someone so dedicated, brings relief from the challenges she has faced since Sophie was taken from her arms. With compassion and empathy, Catherine listens attentively to Marianne's story. She offers a friendly shoulder and an outstretched hand, promising to help Marianne overcome her difficulties and rebuild her life alongside Sophie. Together, they form a powerful alliance, united by their love for the same girl. With Catherine's support, Marianne feels strengthened to face the challenges ahead. She clings to the hope of a better future alongside Sophie, determined to provide her daughter with the love and stability she so deserves. Louis is furious when he finally discovers the truth behind the recent reconciliation between Sophie and her mother, Marianne. A mixture of emotions overwhelms him as he processes the revelation that Catherine was the force behind this reunion. He feels betrayed and hurt, but also begins to recognize the genuine love and sacrifice behind Catherine's actions. The pain of Sophie's loss again consumes him, but he knows he must face the consequences of his own failings. The news of Catherine's betrayal hits Lewis like an unexpected blow. He feels betrayed and indignant, questioning how someone he trusted so much could act against him in such a way. His tumultuous emotions leave him confused and disorientated, unable to find a sense of inner peace. However, behind the anger and hurt, there is a spark of admiration for Catherine, whose courage and determination to help Sophie impresses him, even if he is reluctant to admit it. Lewis dismisses Catherine, who soon gets another job as a nanny. He knows he can no longer trust someone who has betrayed him so deeply, no matter how noble her intentions may have been. The pain of Sophie's loss hurts, especially in his pocket, but he refuses to let it get him down completely. Instead, he focuses on finding a way to move on and rebuild his life, even if it means facing the unknown alone. Now Lewis is forced to look for a job. Something that never even crossed his mind. Every job interview is an opportunity for him to start again, to prove to himself and the world that he is capable of overcoming the challenges that come his way. The independence he seeks is both frightening and liberating, a chance to reconnect with himself and his own ambitions. Life alone is a challenging experience for Lewis, but it is also an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. He learns to rely on his own strength and resilience, even in the most difficult times. And you, what would you have done if you discovered that someone needed your help, like Sophie? Would you have the courage to do as Catherine did? Let me know in the comments. Now on to the next video, even more moving than this one.